Well, here we go, on the cusp of another historic Arctic outbreak, and some parts of the northern plains will be below zero all day on Sunday. Let's take a quick look around the world. The hot spot for today is Telford, Australia, another remote outback town. This is going to be a copper mining town. And if I wanted to go mine some copper, I think this would be a good place. And the world's cold spot, again, eastern Siberia. Today it's going to be the station called Aima, minus 68 degrees there. And that's in that same cold bowl where we find Oymyakon and Verkhoyansk up near the top. So right in between there, and yeah, quite cold today. Here's the surface map analyzed a few hours ago, but we do find a strong weather system moving through the southeastern U.S. and the Midwest. There is liquid rain all the way up towards Kankakee and Fort Wayne, and north of that, snow from Milwaukee out to Des Moines and down towards Springfield. Some cold temperatures in the wake of this system were bringing down single digits into Missouri and Kansas. And further up north, this is going to be the secondary push of Arctic air. And you can see there's some seriously cold air up there, well below zero. In fact, minus 30s and minus 40s. And on this program, we don't really deal with wind chill. It gets kind of confusing and muddles the accurate understanding of what's happening. So these are going to be temperatures in Fahrenheit. You can see we're down to about minus 40. I think that's going to be Red Deer, Calgary is somewhere in here, and about minus 35 in Edmonton. So this is certainly some extremely cold air. So why don't we see what we're dealing with here? And I'm going to use the imaginary car drive scenario. This is a valuable way of breaking down the air masses. So we're going to start in Florida. And there, this is almost the opposite of what's going on up there in the Dakotas. We've got temperatures near 80 degrees with sultry dew points in Florida. And somewhere around here, we hit a frontal boundary. We transition from that toasty air into somewhat milder air with low cloud and fog. You can see that difference in the sky condition and the weather symbols. So that's going to mark the warm front. And as we continue up north, this is going to be an occlusion. It's the same one you saw on the surface chart. And let's just continue on up into the cold air. We get into some somewhat mild air, 50s out there in Tennessee, and start getting into much colder air in the Boot Heel of Missouri, 30s, down into the teens in central Missouri. And here's the serious cold. You can see a blizzard warning up there in Iowa. We get down into single digits in Omaha, and we go below zero in the Dakotas. Yeah, let's keep going. Montana, minus 20, minus 25 at Great Falls. Calgary, minus 24 at this hour. They've warmed up a tiny bit. We're up to late afternoon right now, but there's minus 31 at Edmonton. And we can go on up into the Northwest Territories and look in the source regions. And they've got a little bit of a warm-up in the Mackenzie River Basin, but in the Yukon, Mayo, minus 47, Dawson, minus 40, and some similarly cold air up to the north. Also, a lot of that cold air has made it into the interior of British Columbia. Temperatures well below zero Fahrenheit. There's the Fraser River. That goes all the way down towards Vancouver, and that is a significant source of gap winds. We can see temperatures in Vancouver are extremely cold, down to 16 degrees there. You can see that gap wind gusting up to about 31 knots at Abbotsford. And going down to Seattle, it is a very cold day, 20 degrees there. And around Bellingham, 8 degrees there with winds up to 40 knots. That's not what you think of when you think of the Seattle area, but they are suffering from some of that cold. Also in Portland, they've got some gap winds blowing right through here down the Columbia River. Not really all that strong at the present time, but they did hoist blizzard warnings for the gap in the Cascades right through here. Here's a good chart for understanding what's going on. This is going to be the pressure and thickness We see two main action areas. One is the cold air advection across the southeastern U.S., and a secondary area of cold air advection in the northern plains and northern Rockies. And that is the push of very strong cold air occluded system in the Great Lakes, 978 millibar low up there in northern Indiana. And that's going to connect back to the south, where we have this other baroclinic system, which is lifting northeast. And I forgot, I've got some actual analyzed charts to show you, so there you go. All right, going into tomorrow morning, the cold air blasts south, enters Oklahoma around dawn, and by evening, pushing into Texas. So that's where things are really going to get cold. 1045 millibar high across Saskatchewan. We've got a Pacific weather system coming onshore, and during the weekend, that's going to work southeastward along this front and produce some rather heavy snows in parts of the central plains. Okay, so going forward into the overnight hours, there's 6 a.m. on Sunday. You can see the snow picking up there in the central Rockies. More cold air filtering down into the southeastern U.S. Then by late Sunday, starting to see some precip showing up. Now, there is just enough warm air aloft to support rain in parts of Texas, but it's going to be a mixed bag overnight. You can see some sleet and snow get going. Parts of East Texas could see a little bit of ice accumulation. Then going into late Monday and Tuesday, everything moves east. You can see precip building in the southeastern U.S., another wave of snow moving southeast out of Colorado. And Tuesday is going to be a very cold day across parts of the southern U.S. You can see the 504 decameter line all the way down into the Kansas City area, the 540 all the way south towards the Gulf Coast. And the air mass is a little bit shallow, so the 1,000 through 500 millibar thickness may be a little bit deceiving. Okay, let's go into the remainder of the week. Here comes a stable wave. You can see that really doesn't organize much, kind of falls apart there, but still a gradient in place across the Midwest. Then around late week, looks like another reinforcing push of cold air. This is a little bit more uncertain because it's still 168 hours out, but there could be more cold weather in parts of the southern U.S. going into next weekend. So let's take a look at where that cold air is and where it's headed. The orange is significant. That's going to be minus 30 Fahrenheit and lower. Again, these are not wind chills. These are actual observed values. And this is a fairly large extent of sub-minus 30 air. We don't see that very often. Anyway, going into this weekend, you can see it starting to nose into Montana, and then we get that aqua color spreading south. Aqua is very unusual in the U.S. itself because that is about minus 10 to minus 20. So that is going to flood south with this northerly gradient, driven by this 1040 to 1050 millibar ridge. Then going into Monday and Tuesday, we drain out a lot of that cold air. The pressures up north start subsiding, and we don't see much else. Maybe a weak shot of cold air coming south towards the weekend, but as you can tell, it is not as cold up north. So that's one positive bit of news. Everybody remembers the big polar vortex storm of 2021. This is what the oranges looked like about a week before the event. This is February 7th, February 8th. You can see there was a lot of it building in western Canada and Alaska and Yukon as well. And eventually it did start flooding south into the Dakotas. There it is, on its way south. And around the 14th or 15th, that's when we had some of the real effects coming into the central U.S., kind of off the chart there, but that gives you an idea how it started. So it is definitely very similar, but the big thing that we're missing today here in 2024 is snow cover. Not much of it south of Kansas, and that will limit the reach of that cold air beyond the central plains. Now, as we get that cold air building south and we get some of those upper dynamics moving across the central plains, we will lay down some fresh snow. There's one track right there in Oklahoma and southern Kansas for Sunday night and Monday, and some more of it gets all the way down to the Interstate 20 corridor. I'm not really sure how much of this is valid, but we'll see. But we do need a good fresh blanket of snow to preserve that radiational cooling and allow it to work south, and there's just not really as much of it as what we had in 2021. Now the big thing everybody is wondering is just how cold it's going to get, and I've got some special charts for you here. Let's run this forward into early next week. Well, here's surge number 1, affecting mostly Kansas and Missouri tonight. We get a little bit of a warm-up there in Texas as that weak high moves southeast. Then going into tomorrow, this is where we get the secondary push of Arctic air coming south. You can see it starting to really reinforce there in Kansas, and then it begins its march southward during the day tomorrow. Quite a temperature difference from Dallas up to Wichita. And then as we go forward into the remainder of Saturday, that cold air diving south. By Sunday morning, looks like it's below -10 at Kansas City and about 19 at DFW. Going into the day Sunday, there is a secondary push of Arctic air right in here. And it does look like it gets held back for maybe about 24 hours. During Monday, mostly 20s for Texas, teens along the Red River, but finally, later on Monday, it starts shifting south, and you can see those single digits coming down into Dallas and Little Rock. There's Tuesday, another cold day, and then Wednesday, and finally things start to moderate by Thursday. Here's the sequence of events in the Midwest, the northern plains, and the northeastern U.S. Cold air starting to flood eastward into Illinois during the day tomorrow, and it just keeps getting colder and colder. You can see that during the day on Sunday, it is frigid, below zero at Omaha, all the way up into Sioux Falls. Continued cold through Monday, -14 there at Des Moines, and then going into afternoon on Monday, cold once again, and we're looking at about 10 degrees in Indianapolis. For Tuesday, another cold day, below zero at Chicago on Tuesday night. But finally, we start getting a warm-up there from the west, massive warm-up for Wednesday, and that brings us to the end of the sequence. And if you'd like to see your town on these plots, leave a comment on YouTube. I'll try to handle it if there's a FAA identifier close by. Now, if you would like to see your location on one of these temperature maps with its own number, leave a YouTube comment. If it's someplace reasonable like Greenville or Clinton or Jackson, we can probably add it on, but if it's someplace like Plano or Katy, we're going to have to continue using the big airport's number. So that will be within reason. Leave a comment where you are, and we'll see what we can do. Now, we did talk a little bit about upper air dynamics. You can see that there's a large long-wave trough across the central U.S. this evening. There's a couple smaller scale waves producing areas of upward motion, like this one here at Buffalo. Back behind it, downward motion across the Central Plains, and what looks like maybe a migratory wave across Wyoming. Now, as we roll this forward, you're going to see a couple of standing waves like right here. This is an artifact in the data, so that doesn't really mean anything. So we're going to look at the Pacific, and here comes an inbound system for late Saturday, and that's the one that's going to work down the boundary. So this area of upward motion is what we'll pay attention to. There it is, traversing Utah. Then as we go into early Sunday, we start losing some of the features as it emerges onto the Great Plains, but we do know that there's enough dynamics to support some heavy snows in parts of Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, and that is rare with such a strong Arctic outbreak. The upper motion field continues working eastward into Sunday night into Monday. You can see it there in northeast Texas, and that's producing some wintry weather across that part of the country, and then it sweeps eastward. Another shot of very strong motion coming eastward, that area of strong upward motion, heading into kind of a moisture-starved area on the backside, but still, there could be enough moisture for some snow and snow flurries for Monday and Tuesday. And then we'll give you the composite chart so you can focus on your favorite area. There's way too many areas to cover here, about 80% of the country is under a advisory, watch, or warning of some sort. So we'll just watch it on the chart and see what happens going into tomorrow. Warming trend for the south, reinforcing shot of cold air coming out of Kansas and Missouri. And there it is for Sunday. Some snow flurries developing up there in the Ozarks. Mixed precipitation further south, Sunday night into Monday. And then the second wave, there it is, moving across Oklahoma for early Tuesday and out into the Mississippi River Basin for midday on Tuesday. And then pairing up with that other system on the coast, strong cold air advection in its wake. Then we see that secondary push of cold air come south. This is more of an unknown at this time since it's so far out, but we're looking at about Friday or Saturday for that. Possibly more snow for the south. Doesn't look like any big accumulations at this time. And that brings us to the end of the chart sequence and the end of a significant and historically noteworthy event for January 2024. And that will do it for this edition of Forecast Lab. I need to get this rendered and uploaded and placed into your hands. For the supporters, I'm going to try to do a special show on Sunday. So if you want to see that, you need to sign up on Patreon, and there's the link for that. Hope you all have a great weekend, and definitely prepare for this outbreak, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.